Bosmer, or Wood Elves, are the mere inhabitants of Valenwood, but where their elven kin, the Altmer, prefer formality and stiff tradition, the Bosmer prefer a more romanticised life among the forests of their home. While I paint this one's portrait, let's take a look at the Bosmer. Physically, the Bosmer are nimble and agile. They're shorter and more slight than their mer cousins in the Somerset Isles. They make excellent scouts and forward pies, and there are no better archers in all of Tamriel. They're able to notch, aim and loose arrows in one fluid motion. Their height is dictated by gender, with female Bosmer standing a head or two taller than their male counterparts. Their eyes have star-shaped pupils, and many Bosmer sport a healthy pair of antlers, though they tend to be glued to the head or grown magically, rather than being a part of their anatomy. They also have a tendency of filing their teeth into sharp points. Their natural lifespan ranges from several centuries to millennia, though few in Tamriel have the luxury of dying of old age. Unique among the Bosmer is the ability to control simple-minded creatures, such as the lesser beasts that populate their homeland of Valenwood. Coupling this with a natural resistance to poison and disease and the ability to camouflage themselves to blend in with their environment, you can see why the Empire of Man uses the Bosmer as scouts. The origin of the Bosmer, like most of the sentient races of Tamriel, is lost to time. Some Bosmer believe that the ooze, a shape-shifting and formless substance, is what led to the creation of their race. Before the Green Pact, which we'll get into in a little while, the primordial forests of Tamriel were the perfect environment to allow the shape-shifting Bosmer, born of the ooze, to flourish. With the Green Pact, an accord that was struck with Ifri, one of the spirits who formed at the beginning of time and had a hand in shaping the mortal planes, the Bosmer experienced a schism of sorts. Some Bosmer decided to adhere to the Green Pact, though this meant losing their shape-shifting abilities. Others thought that too steep a price to pay, and remained beholden to the ooze. Legend says that Ifri turned the ooze into a kind of limbo, and those who rejected the Green Pact would have their souls torn from Ifri's embrace. They would find no peace in any afterlife, and would remain formless until the prophesied time of renewal. Some escaped this fate and became changelings, spirits of nature that can take on the many forms of beasts. That is but one creation legend that the Bosmer believe. The Khajiit, and I did a video about the Khajiit that I'll link down below, believe that the Daedric Prince Azura took some of those formless beings from the primordial forests of Nirn and shaped them into the Khajiit. Ifri then bound those who remained into the forms of the Bosmer, so they could never be something other than Mer. The Aldmeri, who are always ready to exaggerate their place in the histories, claim that the Bosmer were descendants of the first elves to explore Tamriel, and to tame the wild forests of their new home, these elves adapted and eventually became the Bosmer, though it must be said that the Aldmeri say that about other races too, so it's worth keeping that in mind. There's some rumours that early Bosmer were known to marry humans, and that their offspring are what we see in the Bosmer's slight stature, though this happened so long ago that rumours is all we have. We can tread more solid ground in the Merithic era, where the Aelids began to trade quite heavily with the Bosmer, and cities began to spring up to capitalise on this. Woodhearth, Avon and Silvanar flourished during this explosion of trade, and the ancient Aelid site of Hektame became a home to the heart of Valenwood, a beautiful tree of immense power that is said to be the soul of Valenwood itself. Unfortunately, this time of bounty wasn't to last. An Aelid necromancer twisted the power of the heart of Valenwood to his own ends and raised an army of the undead to wreak havoc on both the Aelids and the Bosmer. The Aelids had no choice but to seal Hektame, along with the heart of Valenwood, off from the world. The Bosmer also had to fend off assaults from the Malmer, who completely sacked several Bosmer cities, including Haven and Eldenroot. Eventually, as we step out of this time of myth, the Bosmer were united as a people under King Epliar, who founded the Camoran dynasty, an act that would begin the First Era. The Bosmer histories, like much of the histories of the elves, revolve around their battles against the empires of man. In the Bosmer's case, they would find the geography of Tamriel would pit them against Colovia, the western province of Cyrodiil. Skirmishes and battles between men and elves would dictate much of the First, Second and Third eras, but a few things of note happened during the First era that deserve our attention. One of the most terrifying aspects of the Bosmer is the Wild Hunt being invoked. The first mentions of this happened during that period, and would see the ritual turn the Bosmer into horrific eldritch beasts, a magical trait that is inherent to all Bosmer. This transformation cannot be undone, and these monsters lay waste to anything in their path until nothing remains, and they cannibalize themselves in the end. This wild hunt would end with the death of Nord High King Borgus, who had travelled to Cyrodiil to petition for a war against Valenwood. The wild hunt would be invoked again, though much later in the Third Era. Eventually, the Bosmer were absorbed into the Second Empire of Man anyway, and they divided Valenwood into several districts, a countermeasure against rebellion. During the Three Banners War, the central conflict in the Elder Scrolls Online, the Bosmer joined the Aldmeri Dominion along with the Altmer and the Khajiit. It's best described as a shaky alliance at best, with the Thalmor government going as far as to encourage understanding of the Bosmer's strange habits. The Bosmer were divided among themselves about the Dominion too, with some seeing it as their only hope for survival in the battles to come, and some seeing the Dominion as a polluting agent in their sacred forest homes. This unease between the alliance would come to a head during the massacre at Cormount, where the Dominion soldiers slaughtered the residents of the Grotwood. The Altmer, using some ancient pretext, invaded Valenwood in 830 of the Second Era, and though the invasion was bloody, it must be said that under the new Aldmeri Dominion, a relative peace was found for the Bosmer. But, you guessed it, Tiber Septim would rise and once again bring Valenwood into the Empire of Man. The Bosmer, now more isolationist than ever, would retreat to their forests and their domain would be picked at by their neighbours, who took huge swathes of Valenwood for themselves. During the Oblivion Crisis, the Somerset Isles would break away from the Empire and stage a coup in Valenwood that would overthrow the Empire's puppets in the region. And thus, the Third Aldmeri Dominion was formed. If you're losing count of Aldmeri Dominions, I don't blame you, there's a lot of them. And that is where we find ourselves so far in the rise and fall of dominions and empires. The next chapter is to be decided in the Elder Scrolls 6. But empires and wars only tell you so much about a people. To really understand the Bosmer, we have to take a look at how the Green Pact shapes their culture and very way of life. The Green Pact, also known as the Treaty of Frond and Leaf, is a strict moral code upheld by most Bosmer. Its purpose, above all, is to preserve the green, and the tenets are simple. Do not harm the forest of Valenwood. Do not eat anything made from plant life. Only meat is allowed, and when enemies are conquered, it is their meat that must be eaten. Do not kill wastefully, and do not take on the shape of beasts. The eating of their fallen enemies is perhaps the most shocking aspect of Bosmer culture to outsiders, though this practice has largely been abandoned during the many empires of man. It's only really upheld in the small, remote villages of Valenwood. Surprisingly, the Bosmer also don't mind if the other non-Bosmer races fell the trees of Valenwood. I mean, they even buy wood from those that do, but it's a grievous crime for any Bosmer to harm a tree themselves. The Green Pact then has a huge impact on the architecture of the Bosmer. Because they can harm no trees or plants, they build homes in the hollows of trees, or use imported lumber to build simple timber structures to live in. The cities of the Bosmer are mostly high up among the branches of the grot oaks, migratory trees that roam Valenwood. There, Bosmer weave branches together to form homes, taking special care not to harm the trees in the process. Their clothing and decorations tend to lean heavily on stylized floral patterns, and they've made excellent uses of animal products, even creating bridges from bone and sinew. Bosmer fashion choices are seen as tacky by most other races, and sometimes Bosmer will wear things just as a joke. Mostly they like to wear clothing that lets their skin breathe, and see fully covering yourself as a stupid thing to do. Due to the Green Pact, it's nearly always made of leather, though Bosmer do occasionally import cloth from other provinces. The Pact also dictates their weaponry. Forges that burn wood are especially rare in Valenwood. Instead, Bosmer weaponry is often made of bone, such as arrow shafts and spear handles, and stones like flint for spearheads and arrow tips. Their bows, which are the finest in Tamriel, are made from composite animal horn. At the age of 14, a Bosmer will be expected to be a master of the bow, or at least adroit enough to accompany hunting parties to the green. The Bosmer also believe that the animal whose bones have been used in the creation of their weapons have an impact on the characteristics of said weapon. For instance, mammoth bone is said to knock down their enemies, while arrows made from the bones of birds are said to fly more true than arrows made of other beasts. Bosmer food, like all aspects of their life, is confined within the Green Pact. Meat makes up most of their diet, though fruit is allowed, but only once it's fallen from the tree, and the seeds from such fruit have to be replanted immediately. Foods like honey and insects are eaten by most, only the most zealous of Green Pact observers forego them. Ritualistic cannibalism is a huge part of Bosmer culture, though as stated, it mostly fell out of fashion during their time under the Empire. Still, some Bosmer will eat the flesh of their enemies and the flesh of their loved ones after they die. Out of all the races that call Tamriel home, the Bosmer are perhaps the most inclined towards pacifism. They will and have defended their land with bitter fighting, but they aren't known to start conflicts by themselves. They also greatly enjoy diversity and welcome other races with open arms, though most outsiders find Bosmers strange and barbaric. Travellers to Valenwood are often reminded to take great care when drinking the Bosmer speciality of fermented milk, which often has adverse side effects on those who aren't Bosmeri. The Green Pact does not allow the use of paper, and besides, Altmerry inks refuse to dry in the humid forests. So the Bosmer have perfected a type of ink that dries even if submerged in water, and that glows faintly under the shadows of the canopies. And though they don't smoke plants, they occasionally smoke bugs from burned pipes. And finally, we can't discuss the Bosmer's culture without going into the Sylvanar and the Green Lady. The Sylvanar is the voice of the Bosmer. He speaks for them in most diplomatic situations, but to the Bosmer, they are more than just a diplomat. To them, the Sylvanar is an aspect of their spirituality. He represents them not just politically, but also emotionally and physically. He represents the Bosmer in his way of thinking, speaking, and even in his own health and gender. The Sylvanar can grant foreign trade contracts, and any foreign power that wishes to build in Valenwood must do so only with the Sylvanar's blessing. Where the Sylvanar is the Bosmer's spirituality, the Green Lady is their raw, animal-like aspect. The Sylvanar is diplomacy, the Green Lady is passion. Their union, a wedding-like ceremony known as a hand-fasting, is a once-in-a-generation affair. When a Sylvanar dies, the Green will select a new one, and the Green Lady will lose herself in a more bestial way, wreaking death on all those who had a hand in the Sylvanar's death. Once she's seen this through, or dies in the attempt, she joins the Sylvanar in the afterlife until their aspect is revealed again in the next hand-fasting ceremony. And that's the Bosmer and the finished portrait. They are, aside from the Bretons, my favourite race to play as, and that's mainly due to their incredible lore and their adroitness with an arrow. But who do you play as? Let me know down below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this mashup of paint and lore, consider subscribing. I release a new Painting the Lore every Friday. Next week we'll be taking a look at the Dunmer, so until then, farewell.